thinking about the big picture is really important. And I think that because students tend to be very academically minded, they want the practical tools, but I think they value understanding the science behind it oftentimes. And so, of course, being a science teacher, this is something that I'm really excited and energized to talk about. And so if we even go back to developmental origins and we talk to our students about developmental origins of disease, we understand that, you know, when especially the females, when they're developing in their mom's womb, they're developing with all the eggs that they'll have for their lifetime. And so in this way, your health outcomes are really largely impacted by what your grandparents eat and what your grandmother did when she was pregnant with your mom. And then your mom's, therefore, quality, for lack of a better word, of her eggs, which eventually gave rise to you. And so when we think about that trajectory, we have the ability to impact on subsequent generations. And that when we think of intergenerational wealth, of course, we think about financially intergenerational wealth, but part of that is related to your health. And it all really comes down to the choices that we make day to day. And it's hard to imagine that, you know, some generation, couple, you know, decades from now will be impacted by those choices, and how do you care about it? But that's one way of looking at the investment, and one way of thinking of the science behind why it matters so much to give your lineage a fighting chance, as it were. And so when you think more practically day to day, things like having access to a dietitian on campus is really neat. And the dietitians are there and eager to reach out and eager to partner with you. And you can ask them about your questions on what you are eating, but also what you have access to on campus and how you might bring that together. One of the things that the dietitians, when we talk about, you know, what kinds of resources we can create for students will often report that they think that their cultural foods that they've grown up with are high in fat. And so maybe they're not the right tool for them to be using, and they need to have some kind of vegan or some kind of organic salad to the irony of that doesn't escape me, in order to kind of live a healthy lifestyle. But oftentimes these cultural practices and traditions that are passed on are actually rooted in a science. And so when we look at, for example, South Asian foods, and South Asian communities will often have turmeric in their foods. And that turmeric, they know to deliberately partner with pepper, because the pepper will help make the nutrients in the turmeric bioavailable. But that's, you know, the science of it is really fascinating. But when we think, did our grandparents and great-grandparents know that when they passed on tradition? And somewhere along the way, they did, whether they knew it in the scientific sense or not, but they knew the partnering of these foods really mattered. And we see this very clearly with Indigenous populations and how they access food and how important the experience of food is to those communities. And that's true for many different communities. And so when students are thinking, oh, I'm really concerned about the fact that there's a lot of fat in the diet that we normally consume in our culture, our traditional foods, the truth of the matter is that you're exposed to so much high sugar, high fructose, high fat foods in your day-to-day when you go to a shop to pick up your food, that you're probably better off preparing your foods at home and taking some comfort in those traditional foods, knowing that there might even be properties within them that have been passed on in tradition over the years. So I like to encourage my students to, one way to increase your food access while you're on campus is really to bring even just a few items from your home that you know where they came from, you know how they were prepared, and of course you're going to indulge, you're going to be exposed to foods. So, of course you can capitalize on, and you'll expose yourself to some foods from at school, and that's okay. And when you're on campus, really understanding the foods that you have access to. How long does it take me between these two classes to get to XYZ location to access food? Is this the place that I'm going to go to get a coffee, but there's a different place that I'd want to go to grab a healthy snack? And sometimes you can manage some of that decision making by planning in advance. And it all really comes down to that, being able to plan and to be aware and mindful of what we're putting in our bodies. And it's not the most easy or straightforward thing to do, and it certainly isn't the easiest thing to prioritize when we have so many other things. But when you kind of combine the science, as we've been talking about, with the impact that you can have on your own family, like we all want to do good in the world, and we all want to, you know, volunteer for that agency or spend our time on something that really matters to us. Some of these things that should be prioritized as the agency we're going to put our time towards should be our own biology and the generations that come after us.